Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the US offers strong 15-year security guarantees, but Kyiv wants longer. As discussions continue amid the war, President Donald Trump says a deal to end the conflict is closer than ever, but there is still no breakthrough on territory as diplomacy continues. The Kremlin says Ukraine must withdraw its troops from remaining Donbas areas if it wants peace and warns Kyiv could lose more territory otherwise. Moscow says Putin and President Trump have spoken ahead of Trump's talks with Volodymyr Zelensky, with another call planned soon. The United Nations says traumatized civilians in Sudan's El Fasher are living in undignified and unsafe conditions with little water, sanitation, or shelter. Aid officials warned many people are in abandoned buildings or under plastic sheeting as the city struggles with famine and the aftermath of fighting. Taiwan warns more than 100,000 air passengers face delays as China's live fire drills disrupt hundreds of international flights. Authorities say the impact will affect departures, arrivals, and transit services as travel plans are thrown into chaos. Former world heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua is injured in a highway accident in Nigeria that has killed 2 people, local media and police sources say. The crash happened on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway when the vehicle was traveling. It collided with a truck. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet President Donald Trump in the United States as regional tensions rise amid Israel's operations in Gaza. Lebanon and Syria, the talks are at the Mar-a-Lago on Monday, focus on advancing the first phase of the Gaza truce as pressure builds around Iran and regional security. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the US offers strong 15-year security guarantees, but Kyiv wants longer. As discussions continue amid the war, President Donald Trump says a deal to end the conflict is closer than ever, but there is still no breakthrough on territory as diplomacy continues. Thailand's army accuses Cambodia of breaking a ceasefire by sending more than 250 drones over the border. Officials say the incident raises tensions as both sides had agreed to halt hostilities. Now we start from US. US President Donald Trump has met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida, but the talks ended without a major breakthrough on ending the Ukraine-Russia war. After more than 3 hours of discussions, both leaders said progress continues, but key issues remain unresolved. President Trump said peace could be close, but warned the conflict could also drag on for years if talks fail. He stressed the process is complicated and will take more time. The meeting came after Trump held a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump said he still believes Putin wants peace and confirmed another call is expected soon. Major sticking points include territorial concessions and the future of Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Zelensky said about 90% of a peace plan is agreed, but the final details remain difficult. The Ukrainian president also added that the United States is offering strong security guarantees for 15 years, but Ukraine wants more. Zelensky said the conflict has already lasted nearly 15 years. Kyiv is pushing for 30 to 50 years of security assurances, which is a request that Trump has agreed to consider. Despite tensions in past meetings, Trump praised Zelensky's leadership and called him brave, signaling a more positive tone as talks continue. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and also former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Vickery, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, although, there was no breakthrough, what are we to make of what's been said by both leaders now?
Well, Asuma, thanks very much for having me,
Thank you.
and to you and all of your viewers, a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
The good news here, of course, is that there is not a rupture after this meeting as there has been in previous Zelensky Trump meetings. The not so good news is that there does not seem to be an overall strategy. There does not seem to be a partnership, a coalition necessary to bring pressure on Russia. And the principles of the agreement are not laid out. So if you're going to have peace, you must wage it just like war, and you have to have the strategy, the partners, and the principles in place. Continues to be surprising that the major negotiation here is between two entities, Ukraine, U.S., which are supposedly on the same side, instead of negotiations with the other combatant, namely Russia. The conversation which took place between Putin and Trump just prior to the meeting is no substitute for substantive negotiations with Russia. Russia is continuing to show that it wants to take over Ukraine by the bombardments, which were very heavy just prior to the meeting in Mar-a-Lago, obviously designed to send the message that Putin thinks that he will get what he wants by force, if not by negotiation. So it falls back to basic problems that you cannot view this as a real estate transaction. You have to view it as establishing some sort of relationship which will not just be a one-off kind of peace arrangement for a limited number of years, but which will stand the test of time. I think an encouraging part of this, of course, is that more and more Europe seems to be willing to step up to participate in the peace process by further cutting off energy supplies from Russia. But this coalition needs to be expanded. It should be expanded to all of the great democracies, including India, including Japan, Australia, all those who have an interest in peace and prosperity as opposed to national aggrandizement and building an empire, which seems to be the Putin orientation.
Right. And also Trump said peace could be close, but warned the conflict could also drag on for years if talks fail. Do you think Trump is frustrated? Do you think Trump's patience will last until next year, before his again midterm elections? Do you think he will continue mediating between them?
Well, it is good news that he is still involved, as opposed to earlier signs. You remember the last time there was a major meeting between Trump and Zelensky. Trump talked to Putin first and backed off from promises to give Zelensky missiles, which he needed. I think that everything that is said by President Trump has to be taken with a grain of salt. You know that he has claimed that he has brought peace in 8 different situations around the world already. And when you examine those, whether it be Pakistan, India, whether it be Congo, Rwanda, whether it be Thailand, the peace is not there. And so it's good news that he continues to be involved. But the man's patience is not one of a long-term relationship building. It is to get a win for him. So at some point, he will find a way, if there is not further progress in terms of an actual ceasefire, to walk away from it. And this is very much the danger. As I say, the counterbalance to that is that Europe seems to be getting its act together, and hopefully the saner heads in Europe, in the United States, Ukraine, other great democracies like India can prevail and try to rebuild some of the principle which has largely kept the peace in the world since World War II, namely the principles of the UN Charter against non-aggression. And of course, the overarching issue is one of major war, nuclear war. And this Ukraine situation has to be resolved in order to get us back on a peace and prosperity road, as opposed to national aggrandizement and empire building.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. And Mr. Vickery, please stay with us as we come back to you after breaking news. Now we have a breaking news. According to reports, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff holds a phone call with Ukrainian negotiators and President Volodymyr Zelensky. This call follows U.S. President Donald Trump's talks with Zelensky as diplomatic efforts to advance Ukraine peace discussions continue. Now, we welcome back Mr. Raymond Vickery. He's an international affairs expert and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Vickery, for staying with us. Now, looking at the breaking news, well, we can only speculate. What do you think Steve Witkoff called Zelensky or the Ukraine side for?
Well, I think that if you have a meeting between principals, there always has to be follow-up. The problem, of course, is that President Trump has relied on an old real estate friend of his to carry forward his transactional view of how you bring peace and prosperity. Mr. Witkoff may be excellent at real estate deals, but he's not a diplomat. Relying on Mr. Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, it is setting aside the usual kinds of follow-up, which would be between the State Department and Foreign Ministry. It would involve national security advisors, and this is the modus operandi of the Trump administration. So it's good that there is some follow-up, because obviously at the kind of high-level overall principles and meeting, you don't have the progress which is necessary to nail down details. But here again, I do not believe that this it really indicates any kind of strategy. It doesn't indicate that you have involved the partners in Western Europe and other great democracies. And it doesn't show that the principles have been agreed upon by the people who should be putting pressure on Putin and Russia. So yes, there has to be follow-up. The kind of principles meeting, making a deal, just doesn't work. But it is not any sign of a breakthrough.
Yes. Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Vickery. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving the focus to Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed amendments to the law allowing Russia to ignore rulings issued by foreign and international criminal courts. The move comes as Ukraine and European allies push legal action against Moscow over alleged war crimes linked to the conflict in Ukraine. Under the new legislation, Russia can disregard judgments from foreign courts acting on behalf of other governments if Moscow was not a participant in the proceedings. It also allows Russia to ignore rulings from international legal bodies whose authority is not based on a UN Security Council resolution or an agreement with Russia. The change appears aimed at countering efforts such as the International Criminal Court arrest warrants issued against President Putin and other Russian officials, which Moscow has rejected as illegitimate. Russia denies all allegations of war crimes and says its actions in Ukraine have been misrepresented. The law change comes as President Donald Trump attempts to broker a peace deal in Ukraine, even as legal and diplomatic pressure on Russia continues to mount. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Raymond Vickery from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Vickery, for staying with us. Now looking at this, why do you think Putin or why do you think Russia has decided to do so? And now moving forward, what will be the implications of Russia rejecting the authority of international criminal courts for global justice?
Well, the international rule of law is one to be devoutly hoped for. And at the end of the old Soviet Union, Russia had made overtures to participate in an international rule of law. In fact, to be a stronger participant during those early days of the end of the Cold War, or to be a stronger participant, quite frankly, than the United States was. But what has happened, of course, is that Putin has subverted the rule of law. He subverted democracy, which was on the rise in Russia, in favor of the old-time way of doing things in Russia, which is basically having a czar, to have an authoritarian figure who decides what the law will be. So this is cloaked. This latest move of Putin's is cloaked in legalistic terms, but it is really not a part of law and rule of law at all. It is simply the authoritarian Putin showing once again that he's in charge in Russia and that there are no constraints on him, whether they be domestic or international. So we have to look at the reality of what has happened. And the reality is that the international system, whether it be the International Court of Criminal Justice, whether it be United Nations, the principles of the UN Charter, whether it be domestically in the United States, and adherence to the international treaties, those things have been dissipated in the past few years. And we have to get back as a world community to a situation in which there are principles and there are constraints on rulers. Otherwise, the path ahead is very dark indeed. And Putin withdrawing just indicates the darkness of that path because it leads to conflict. That was the lesson of the 20th.
Has been described as a ghost of its former self, with widespread destruction and ongoing famine. Meanwhile, El Fasher has been labeled Sudan's epicenter of human suffering. The city was taken by the Rapid Support Forces in October, following a brutal 500-day siege. However, a UN team, which was allowed to stay for only a few hours, found a hospital without supplies and a small market operating on minimal produce. Investigations into atrocities and mass graves are still ongoing. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now looking at this, the dire situation in Sudan, what strategic or political factors may be limiting the sustained UN access, also intervention by international organizations in El Fasher?
Assume, like in all these situations, there is so much history to talk about that you and I don't have time for. But let's just go back and remind ourselves, if I have my information correct, that Sudan, then a civilian government back in 2020, then was signing up to the Abraham Accords, the third Arab country to then do so. There was a coup 2021 October against the civilian government, military coup, and then all the events that have then unfolded since then. So sadly, since I believe October 2023, where this civil war between two military factions, and you could argue initially from the north and the south, if you look at maps that are then unfolded of who then has what territory. And as what is so sad, like in many theaters of war, is that civilians suffer. And you raise the important point of how many people used to live there, million people, and it doesn't represent what it did a number of years ago. So the UN then is there. I'm not just going by the comments that they have said, their first view of what people are going through and what they're suffering on the ground. This has to, like other theatres of war, this has to come to an end. But there's also, we have to understand the history of what has led to this. And of course, Sudan, I think, gained independence in 1956 from UK, Egyptian influence rule at that time. And it has continued, whether there's been one coup after another. It's a sad history, but I think it's very significant when a civilian government then wanted to sign up for the Abraham Accords and then to recognize Israel. Why do I say that? All of these issues in that theater, in that part of the world, are all part of this. And if you have a certain ideology that does not want to seek peace, you just want power, and that you don't particularly care of the effect that you are then bringing on the civilian population of that country, then you have to ask yourself some very, very serious questions. And also, we then have to look at, and the reason why I say this is because of the Muslim Brotherhood influence within that region, which is also then not accepted by Arab states within the area and around. And what happens within the West is that we very often think that the answers to this are very, very simplistic, when they're extremely ideological and very, very deep. And that's why we have to read around the subject intensively and understand the history. Asuma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for laying it out all there for us. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to Turkey, 3 Turkish police officers and 6 Islamic State terrorists were killed during a prolonged gun battle in northwest Turkey, authorities have said. The clash followed a large-scale counter-terror operation targeting suspected IS members planning attacks during the holiday season. Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya said the firefight broke out during a raid on a property in Yalova province, south of Istanbul. The operation lasted nearly 8 hours with sporadic gunfire reported throughout. 8 police officers and another security personnel were wounded. Security forces also rescued 5 women and 6 children from inside of the building. The terrorists killed were all Turkish citizens, according to officials. The raid came days after Turkish police detained 115 suspected IS members accused of plotting attacks on Christmas and New Year celebrations. In total, coordinated raids were carried out at more than 100 locations across 15 provinces. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey would continue its fight against Islamic State, both domestically and beyond its borders, as authorities warn of renewed threats from the group. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, what does the scale and intensity of this operation suggest about current level of the Islamic State threat in Turkey And what are the political implications of Turkey framing this fight against IS as both domestic and cross-border priority for them?
Asuma, let's just remember that
Yes.
the celebration that has gone on within Syria in regard to getting rid of Assad and bringing the man in the suit, the well, according to some, but the terrorist leader that is now, or was, that is now in there, that used to have a big price on his head by American administration. Why do I say that? This is complex.
Yes.
On one level, but Turkey has then has helped and has been number one in the overthrow of the previous head then of Syria, and it then shows the complexity of the area and who has Zelensky, the new Syrian leader, has he actually got the handle on all the different factions that are going on in certain quarters of Syria? No, he has not. And also we have to remember what has gone on in southern Syria in regard to against the Druze and against the Alawites and against other Christians. So it's an ideological battle with complexities which we need hours and hours to talk about. Because on the one hand, Turkey is then flexing its muscles with its big army, and then is turning around and saying, tomorrow we take Jerusalem. There'll be a big show of force, and contribution to this from January the 1st or 2nd by Erdogan's son. Why do I say all this again? All of this has to be put into the pot and an understanding of all the complexities of this and how fast things are moving. And it comes back down to ideology and how people then view other tribal groups, other people groups, and then think it's perfectly acceptable to then wipe them out. There is also consequences of within actions that Turkey are then overseeing as well, and it's then understanding their influence and why certain other people, as you said, ISIS, are then turning around and going, no, we are not putting up with this at all. So we have to keep an eye on, very much keep an eye on what Turkey are doing, what they are up to, and all the other responses from other countries within that region. And keeping an eye on Turkey's views of Israel and vice versa, and what's happening in the Trump administration, where Trump has recently, he's giving respect to Erdogan and at times trolling him on Twitter. There is much to look at that, because as we've seen over the last 2 years, the map of the Middle East has changed rather dramatically, and then it's understanding why. You could even say that Syria is now Greater Turkey. That's how they then view it, in my humble opinion. Asuma.
That is so enlightening and interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Afghanistan, Afghan farmers are still feeling the impact of the Taliban's ban on opium poppy cultivation, 3 years after it was imposed, according to the United Nations. The UN says poppy production has dropped to just over 10,000 hectares this year, one of the lowest levels ever recorded. However, cultivation has shifted from the south to northern provinces such as Badakhshan, Kunduz, and Balkh. Surveys show most farming families have not been able to fully replace poppy income. Many have turned to wheat and other crops, but earnings remain far lower. The UN warns the loss is deepening poverty and food insecurity and is urging greater support for high-value legal crops to help farmers sustain their livelihoods. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how effective can international engagement be, although limited, be in influencing the agriculture and economic policy after Taliban has controlled Afghanistan and took over, banned opium poppy farming?
Well, as we know, since 1979, when the Russians went into Afghanistan and the Mujahideen then fought them, and the backing of that by Americans and other Western countries against Russia. We then also have to bear in mind what happened after 2000, the bombing of the twin towers, the collapse of them, and then the invasion of Afghanistan 2001 by American and Allied forces, including the UK. All of this has had ramifications for many years on that area. We have to remember that poppy, the foundation of heroin. No, that's the last thing that we want to see exported around the world, and that's very much the last thing that President Trump administration will want to see any of that drug then ending up in America, or anyone who's then sensible. They don't want to see that ending up in their own countries as well. It also could be argued, without sounding too conspiratorial, which pharmacia company would be interested in getting hold of that harvest. The destruction, of course, that heroin does, and yes, as you quite rightly raise, how do people then make a living? Now, we are basing this on a UN comment. There'd be interesting to look at other people who had their boots on the ground to look at this and assess all this, because at times, of course, the UN uses their comments, their reports, to push a particular ideology and a way of thinking. But the number one thing is that we would wish families, people to survive and thrive by not growing poppies and heroin. And that leading to the production of heroin as that basis. It's always been particularly a controversial discussion in regard to the American invasion of Afghanistan and allies after from 2001 in regard to the fields. Was that poppy the poppies the derivative of that then getting out into the big wide world? That's another discussion that ends up taking us potentially down a conspiratorial route. But we all know drugs. No, thank you. We want to see that end, and the devastation it then brings on into countries, into young people and beyond is extremely appalling and very sad. But also at the same time, Afghanistan, we need to see them be able to make money from other crops. But we also need good reports on the ground that go over a number of years to work out what has actually really gone on in that situation, in my humble opinion, Asuma.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland, for sharing that. And also, of course, my mind also goes into what was happening when Americans were there to these poppy harvest or farmers, and where was it going? But anyway, going back to our discussion, what risks does this income gap that has left by reduced poppy cultivation poses for the current people and the government in Afghanistan? And is Taliban government unable to effectively replace or give something else, or create jobs for these people?
Well, it's been very difficult for America, for Western allies, to then impose democracy, or the way that we view the rule of law within that part of the world, which has a very interesting history, which we could look at over the last 250 years, and the prices paid there. Are the Taliban, will they be interested in doing that? We're talking to a group that doesn't believe in educating women and young girls, doesn't believe in that. So we are dealing with some huge ideological issues. So will it suit them? will they turn around and say, no, we'd like to see this continue to be exported because we know the damage it also does in the Western world, an ideology that they don't agree with. It may be uncomfortable or offensive to some for me to say that, but we have to look at these issues realistically. You and I, yes, we'd like to see other crops grown, and we'd like to see the heroin stopped because it passes all over various borders from that point. Whether we get to this, I truly cannot say at this point. But as I've said earlier, it'd be very interesting to see other bodies doing studies to find out the consequences of this that have gone on for many years. We have engaged in the past in the opium wars. People can look that up in regard to the UK, in regard to Britannia, in regard to the history of that. It's again complex, and why we have to look back. But the bottom line is, I'd say, drugs, no, thank you, not good at all in the way that it affects people. And I wish to see that end across the world. How we actually get there, as you and I are trying to discuss, is the most important thing, because it's complex, in my humble opinion.
Yes,
Assume.
indeed. Thank you for sharing that important information and message with us, Mr. Sutherland, and staying with us throughout our news. Now we move on to UK. British former heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua has been involved in a car crash in Ogun State of Nigeria, which tragically claimed the lives of 2 individuals. The incident occurred on a busy stretch of the Lagos to Ibadan expressway when Joshua's vehicle collided with another car. Joshua, who recently celebrated a 6th-round knockout victory over Jake Paul, sustained minor injuries in the crash. He was reportedly seen dazed in the passenger seat of his vehicle amid broken glass in footage circulating online. Local police are investigating the cause of this accident. Joshua's promoter, Eddie Hearn, has confirmed efforts to contact the boxer and expressed relief that from initial reports, Joshua appears to be all right. Joshua, aged 36, is currently in Nigeria on a holiday following his recent victory, which brought his professional record to 29 wins out of 33 fights. That's all we have time for. Keep watching News.